"You're not bringing that thing inside. Ellie, it's soaking wet and could be diseased." Her aunt barked from the porch, arms crossed, unmoved by the shivering creature at the edge of their gate, but Ellie didn't answer. Her boots squelched in the mud as she took slow steps forward, her breath fogging up in the cold June rain. The dog wasn't moving, just standing there, rain trailing off his fur like sorrow rolling down skin. A German shepherd, old but proud, his body rigid with exhaustion, his eyes locked on the door like he'd been waiting for it to open his whole life. She knelt despite the wet. The dog didn't flinch, he didn't wag. He just stared at her with a kind of silence that screamed something deeper. As she reached out her hand, she noticed the collar, worn leather, buckled too tightly, the metal tag rusted around the edges but still readable. Her fingers trembled as she turned it over. She froze. The words were barely legible, but they cut like glass. "If you find him, tell Ellie I tried." Her breath caught, her name, and not someone else. Not a coincidence. Not just a stray dog in a storm. Ellie stumbled back, almost slipping in the mud, heart pounding. Her aunt's voice faded behind her. The trees seemed to lean closer. Somewhere in the branches, a raven shook the rain from its wings and flew. Ellie hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, at least not like that. Not in that way. Not in connection with what had been buried so long ago she barely allowed herself to think of it. But now a dog had arrived, a stranger in the storm, with a message from a wound she'd forced shut. He stood, still not barking, still not moving, except for the rain dripping from his chin. His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't twitch. It was as if he'd spent days, maybe longer, waiting only for her, only for this moment. And Ellie, soaked to the bone, felt something old and sharp unravel inside her. She reached again, this time slowly undoing the collar. Beneath the first tag, there was another, smaller one she hadn't noticed wedged behind the rusted metal. It had a phone number, but no name. A chill sliced through her spine, not from the rain, from memory, not from guilt. From the sudden flood of a summer 6 years ago when she had made a decision in a hospital corridor, one that ended with someone walking away with trembling hands and leaving something behind. The dog let out a soft, broken whine. Just once, then silence. Ellie stood up, turned toward the house and said only one thing, her voice like stone. "Move, Aunt Margot, he's coming in." The porch door creaked as she opened it wide. The rain hissing around her, the dog didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, and everything changed. The storm hadn't stopped, it just quieted, the way some grief does, settling into corners, soaking into the floorboards. The dog lay curled near the cold stove, his fur still damp but no longer dripping. Ellie had wrapped him in a worn flannel blanket, the kind her mother used to keep folded at the foot of the guest bed. Back when this house still felt like a place people came home to, now it felt like a waiting room for ghosts. She watched him from across the kitchen, arms locked tightly around herself. Aunt Margot had disappeared upstairs, muttering about fleas and pneumonia, but not before leaving a folded towel and a grumbled "suit yourself." The lights flickered once, and Ellie's eyes went back to the collar on the counter. That line again. "Tell Ellie I tried." It sounded like the ending to a letter that was never mailed, or a last sentence from someone who didn't know if he'd be forgiven. The number on the second tag haunted her more than the message. It had a local area code, one that should have been long behind her. She'd changed her number, blocked old names, even cut off social media, anything to keep the past from brushing up against her skin. But now the past had found its way to her porch and tracked mud into her kitchen. She picked up her phone. The number burned into her mind. Her thumb hovered over the keypad. She dialed once, let it ring once, then hung up before the second chime. The dog's ears twitched. His eyes were open and staring straight at her. There was something knowing in them, not just loyalty, not just longing, but memory. Dogs don't remember in pictures or timelines. They remember scents, footsteps, gestures. They remember sorrow when it smells like hospital antiseptic and the sound of a boy crying behind a closed door. She knelt beside him, the wooden floor cold against her knees. He didn't flinch when she touched his fur. Instead, he pressed his muzzle against her leg and sighed, as if some part of him had been waiting for this permission for her to accept his presence. "What's your name?" she asked quietly, voice barely louder than the rain tapping the windows. "No," Tag said it. No answer came, but he blinked, slow and solemn, like he'd had one once and had long since stopped expecting to hear it. Ellie ran her fingers through his fur, untangling little knots. That's when she found it, a scar beneath the fur, running like an old seam along his shoulder. Not fresh, not recent. The kind of wound that meant someone had stitched him up, someone who cared, or maybe someone who had no choice but to try. Her breath hitched. 6 years ago she'd spent a summer volunteering at a trauma rehab clinic, one she had begged her mother not to send her to. But her mother had insisted, "You need to learn what letting go looks like." Back then, Ellie had been angry at the world and even angrier at someone else. A boy named Noah. A boy who never cried. Not even when they took his dog away. She remembered it now. Not just the boy, but the dog. A German shepherd, maybe 3 years old, then injured his leg in a brace. She'd fed him bits of apple and watched as Noah taught him tricks with a silent hand. The dog's name had been ruined. It all came rushing back like the wind through the broken chimney vent. She stood up quickly, knocking the stool over behind. Her Rune lifted his head but didn't move otherwise. It wasn't fear in his eyes. It was patience. He remembered her. Maybe not by name, maybe not by face, but by scent, by instinct, by the kind of knowing that lives beneath words. Ellie pressed her palms to her face and breathed in through her fingers. The number, the tag, the message, the boy. Noah. Could it really be him, after all this time? She reached for her phone again, this time with shaking hands. Dialed slower, let it ring. 1 ring. 2 3 then a click. A voice came through the other side. Male, tired, weathered. Hello. Her lips moved but no sound came. Her throat constricted around the memory, around the regret. The voice came again. Hello, who is this? She swallowed, then forced the words out. This is Ellie. I found your dog. There was a long pause. Long enough for the rain to change rhythm. Long enough for Rune to rest, his head back down. Then softly, with disbelief, Noah spoke. You got the message? Her knees gave out. She sank to the floor. You wrote that for me, she whispered. I didn't know where else to send it. Noah replied, voice trembling. He kept running, always toward the road that led west, always stopping at doors. I tried to keep him home, Ellie, but I think he still remembered you. Ellie closed her eyes. Rune sighed again, his breath warm against her ankle. You said ... You tried. I did, Noah answered. For 6 years. The line went quiet. The dog didn't move. The storm outside kept singing its lonely lullaby. Ellie opened her eyes again, staring at the dog curled by her stove. He hadn't come by accident. He hadn't wandered lost. He had chosen, carried a message across miles, across memories, across wounds that still hadn't closed. And now that he was here, Ellie didn't feel alone anymore. Not in the way that mattered. She picked up the collar, the tags clinking softly in her hand. I think Rune's home, she said, more to herself than the phone. But Noah heard, and for a while neither of them spoke. Nothing more needed to be said. Not yet. Not tonight. The rain had stopped by morning, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than thunder. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, a chipped mug of cold coffee between her hands, staring at the German Shepherd lying by the back door. He hadn't eaten, he hadn't moved much, just that same alert posture, as if he was still waiting for something, or someone. The collar sat on the counter, tags lined up like evidence. Her fingers itched to call the number engraved beneath the first message, but the voice in her head, the one that hadn't spoken in years, whispered caution. She didn't want to open that door. Not if it meant remembering the worst day of her life. Her aunt hadn't spoken to her since the dog was let inside. She just slammed cupboards and muttered about muddy floors and sick animals. Ellie didn't care. Something in the dog's presence had hollowed her out, like his stillness mirrored the ache she'd never fully shaken. She'd named him Storm, without really deciding to. It just fit. Quiet, watchful, always carrying the weight of something no one else could see. Later that day, Ellie took him for a walk down the gravel road behind the house. The sun was struggling behind clouds, casting thin silver light on the wet grass. Storm walked beside her without a leash, his pace steady, head low. Every few steps he'd stop and glance behind them, ears twitching as if expecting someone to catch up, as if used to being followed or tracked. They reached the edge of an old trail that led to the orchard, a place Ellie hadn't gone in years. It was where she and Jace used to hide during those long summers back when they believed the world would give them second chances just for the asking. She paused. Storm did too. He tilted his head, then walked ahead of her, slow and sure. Branches brushed her shoulders as they entered the grove, leaves dripping quietly. Her boots crunched over damp twigs and forgotten memories. And then Storm stopped. Right in the center of the orchard clearing was a patch of bare earth. No grass, no weeds, just a circle of disturbed soil. Ellie's breath caught. Storm sniffed it once, then sat beside it with eerie calm, his eyes fixed on her, not with fear, not even sadness, with expectation. Ellie knelt slowly, brushing the dirt with her hands. Something metal glinted underneath. A small tin box, weathered, sealed with duct tape along the edges. Her chest tightened. She peeled it open, fingers trembling. Inside, folded like a letter from a life she never meant to reopen, was a photograph. A younger, smiling arm slung around Jace's same olive eyes that now stared at her through Storm's soul. And behind them, a blur of fur. The same dog. Storm had been his. A sharp intake of breath escaped her lips. She turned over the photo, faded ink scrolled across the back. If she ever finds you, make her remember. Ellie sank, back knees in the dirt, heart thundering. The rain had only been the beginning. Jace hadn't just disappeared that day at the hospital. He'd planned something, left something behind. And Storm had carried it across years, across miles. Not just survival, not just loyalty, a mission. She pressed her forehead against the dog's head, tears threatening. For all the years she'd shut it down. Told herself he'd walked away and it was easier that way. Something deeper had remained. And now it was standing beside her, breathing, silent, waiting. Storm didn't move. He didn't need to. She understood. But Even as the weight of the memory settled, a new question surfaced, one that changed the shape of everything. How had the dog found her now? Not just the message. The timing, the precision. 6 years gone, no tracking chip, no obvious sign, just a name on a collar and a broken path through time. Someone had sent him, someone had known. Ellie stood, clutching the photo in one hand, Storm's collar in the other. The orchard no longer felt empty, it felt watched. She didn't know what scared her more, what the message revealed, or what it might still be hiding. The night crept in slowly, blanketing the small cottage in a hush broken only by the sound of dripping water from the porch eaves. Ellie sat cross-legged on the wooden floor near the fireplace. The dog curled beside her, head resting on her thigh like he had known her forever. She hadn't lit a fire. She hadn't moved much since drying him off and giving him half a bowl of leftover stew he had barely eaten. He wasn't sick, just still, like the world around him had lost its urgency. Like he had done what he came to do, and now was simply waiting for something to end. The collar lay on the table. Ellie had scrubbed the rust off the tag until her hands stung. There was no mistaking it now beneath the faint engraving of her name and the strange message. There was a second, newer etching. Small initials, LK. She hadn't spoken those letters in years, and now they glowed like embers in her memory. Liam Kane. She could still hear his voice in the old cabin where they'd hidden away that one summer after graduation, where everything felt like it had just begun. Before the accident, before the silence, before Liam walked out of the hospital without a word and vanished. All she had left of him was a letter that never made sense, full of crossed-out lines and a sentence she never understood. If I can't speak it, I'll leave it with someone who can. She thought he meant his mother. She thought he meant forgiveness. But now, this dog, this living, breathing question. The dog shifted slightly, letting out a deep breath, almost a sigh. Ellie brushed a hand across his ears. That same gesture. She used to do it to Liam, laughing as he closed his eyes and leaned into a hand, the way this dog did. And that's when she saw it. A small scar under his chin, faint, but there. Her breath hitched. She remembered Liam telling her once, back when they were still kids, about a German shepherd his family adopted when he was 15. He'd named it Ranger after some old movie. The dog had taken a fall as a pup cut his chin open on a fence post during a storm. He'd told her that story during a night when they lay staring at the ceiling, imagining futures that never came. She looked down again, her hand hovering above the dog's scar. It couldn't be Ranger. Would have been almost 13 now unless... A car passed down the hill, headlights flashing briefly across the living room walls. The dog stirred again, lifting his head for the first time and glancing toward the door, not with curiosity, but recognition. He stood, bones creaking beneath his coat, and walked to the door. Ellie followed, heart pounding. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. The trees were shadows, tall and quiet. She opened the door slowly. At first there was nothing, then movement, a figure limping, thin, moving slowly up the gravel path. Her stomach dropped. The dog stepped outside, paused, touching the wet earth like he knew this ground. He didn't bark, didn't run, he waited. Man came closer, face half hidden beneath a hood. But Ellie saw it before the light caught him, saw the weight of time etched into familiar features. The same crooked nose, the way he leaned to the left slightly, just like Liam always did after the motorcycle wreck. She didn't speak. She could in single quotes too. Liam stopped a few feet away. Rain beaded on his shoulders, his lips parted, but he said nothing at first. His eyes dropped to the dog, then back to her. Didn't know where else to send him, he said, voice hoarse, fragile. I didn't think you'd want me. Ellie swallowed hard. Rage, grief, confusion, all collided in her chest. I didn't, she whispered. I still don't know if I do. The dog looked between them like some silent witness to a pain that had never stopped aging. I tried to leave him at the shelter, Liam continued, but he kept running, always back to the last place he remembered, and then I realized it wasn't the place, it was the person. He looked at her with eyes that held every apology words couldn't carry. Ellie felt the ache behind her ribs, shift, not healing, just shifting. The dog came back and leaned gently into her leg, and for the first time, Ellie reached out, not for Liam but for the part of him that never left. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something, and it had come through the storm. The next morning came slow and gray, the kind of morning where time feels suspended, where everything moves just a little softer, like the world is holding its breath. Ellie hadn't slept. She had sat at the kitchen table all night, watching the light change on the horizon, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of untouched tea. Across from her, Liam sat quietly, eyes sunken, fingers trembling slightly when he lifted them to his face. Between them lay the dog, curled on an old blanket, breathing steady and warm. The storm had passed, but the air inside the house still felt like thunder could return at any second. For hours they didn't speak, not because there wasn't anything to say, but because the words had grown too large for their mouths. And maybe they knew that trying too soon would only cause the wounds to split wider. It wasn't silence, it was presence. And for Ellie it was the first time she had let him sit in it with her since that night at the hospital. No blame, no explanations, just the truth between them, breathing. Eventually Liam reached for the collar on the table and turned it over in his hands. "I had it made before I left," he said, voice quiet. "I thought if something happened to me, at least he might find you. I didn't know if you'd want that, but I hoped." Ellie didn't respond right away. She was watching the rainwater dry in streaks on the window pane, the smudges left behind like faint old scars. She thought about how much of her life had been shaped by things left unsaid, by the ache of absence and the weight of stories never finished. "I didn't need the dog to find me," she finally said. "I needed you to stay." Liam nodded. His jaw clenched. His fingers gripped the collar tighter before he set it down again, gently this time. He looked older than she remembered, not just in the lines on his face, but in the way he carried himself. Like a man who had spent years walking with stones in his pockets. "I was broken, Elle," he said, "after the accident. After what we lost, I didn't know how to be in the same room as you without feeling like I was drowning in everything we didn't get to be." She blinked hard. She didn't want tears, not now. Not when it had taken so long to sit across from the person who had once made her laugh until she couldn't breathe. "And what now?" she asked. "What do you want from me now?" Liam shook his head slowly. "I don't want anything. I just needed to see if he got home. That was all." The dog lifted his head as if he understood, eyes flicking from Liam to Ellie. Then he stood slow, deliberate, and walked to the door, not scratching, just waiting. Liam rose too, with effort, and followed. Ellie stood, heart thudding. "So that's it." He paused, hand resting on the doorknob. He didn't turn. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't even know if I deserve it, but he remembered you, through everything. Every move, every year. He kept coming, back to the places we talked about. I think some part of him thought maybe we weren't finished." Ellie stepped closer, her voice steadier now. "Maybe we aren't." Liam turned then, eyes wet but unashamed. "Even if we are, thank you for letting him in." She looked down at the dog who now stood between them, tail low, ear soft, a living reminder of a chapter neither of them had dared to reread. Ellie took a breath. "Leave him with me," she said, voice firm, "if that's what he wants. But you come back when you're ready to talk, not run, not disappear. Talk." Liam nodded, and something in his face softened, like a long winter melting at the edges. "Okay," he said. "I will." He knelt, pressed his forehead to the dog's, whispering something Ellie couldn't hear. The dog licked his chin once, then padded back to Ellie's side. Liam didn't linger. He stepped into the morning without ceremony, into a world that had stopped waiting for him but hadn't closed the door. Ellie watched him go, the trees swallowing him with each step, until there was only wind and the quiet sound of paws returning to the kitchen tiles. Later that evening, the house was warmer. The dog ranger, she decided, slept curled against the couch, his breathing peaceful in a way that made her chest ache with relief. Ellie sat by the window, a blanket wrapped around her legs, the collar still resting in her palm. She traced the letters slowly, over and over, letting the weight of them settle without breaking her. Some wounds don't heal with time. They heal with return, with reckoning, with rainstorms and silence and the courage to open the door anyway. Outside, dusk poured gently over the hills, soft and golden, like forgiveness offered without a name. Ellie leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered the last thing she'd meant to say all those years ago. To the boy who left and the dog who remembered, "You made it home."